Hi everyone, you're watching How to Quilt Part 3, putting together the quilt top, which as you can see, my quilt top is right behind me. And you can find the other videos in the How to Quilt series in a playlist linked below. Remember to subscribe and click the little bell alert and you'll be notified anytime one of my videos posts, and they'll be all about sewing and projects and do-it-yourself and fun little crafts. So let's jump right into the instructions on how to take a little quilt block into a whole entire quilt top. So let's say this is your example quilt, and these squares are going to be aligned horizontally. There are plenty of ways that you can put this together. You could join these blocks together as you did with these, and then create several blocks and piece them together. Or you can do what I'm going to do in this demonstration, which would be to sew a row together. So I would stitch all of these together, and then I would do the next row all the way into the top. So once those were done, I would take them to the iron and press the seams, and I would have 6 complete rows, and then I would sew the rows to each other. I'll show you exactly what I mean when I actually start sewing them together, but now I'm going to show you an example of diagonally oriented. Okay, so if this was your quilt, then I would do the same technique and I would work in rows. So I would sew these together and just continue down, and then I would piece them together. And then when everything would be sewn together, obviously it's a zigzag edge, and so you would go in and just place your ruler where you would want it and cut off any of these corners to create nice straight seams. And then if you didn't want the colored squares to be right on the edge of your quilt, you can even add in more white to create more of a white border. With my particular design, I have some edges that aren't typical to what I showed in the examples, and I'll be adding in other white pieces to fill in those areas. But it's still the same technique. I'm going to be sewing the rows together, working my way over, and then putting those rows together, and then adding in the pieces that I need. So what I like to do is just work in the order of the attachment, and I will just pile them right together like this, and that will be one of my rows, and I'll just keep stacking them row by row and returning them back to which row they're in. Now I have all of my rows stacked together, and I just am going to get a little container, and this is where I will keep all of them, and they will be in an order. To make a difference between each row so I know when to stop connecting them, I will just angle it. And there is my stack, and I will head over to my sewing machine and start putting these rows together. Now when you come to your machine and you have everything laid out, it's really helpful to still have your design nearby so you can refer to it. So this is my first row that I'm putting together. With my design, I know that I'm going to have an alternating pattern, match up these corners and have everything nice and straight, and begin sewing. Make sure that you keep the edge of your fabric right at the 1/4 of an inch marker. Now right here is a tricky situation. Do you take this off and pull it out and restart everything to add this onto it, or do you stagger between 2 different rows so that you can just keep feeding in? So I know that this is my next row, so I'm just going to take the top 2 pieces, and I'll keep my 2 rows in 2 different piles right in front of me as I work. Now this piece is free to take out, and I will connect it to the last piece in that row. And this is my first row complete, so I will set it aside. The next piece that I have to add to this is this piece, but I don't want to take that off, so I'm going to bring another row, and I'm going to set this right here. Just keep on continuing until you have all of these rows put together, and then we will take them over to the iron and press all of the seams open. Okay, now I'm going to iron all of the seams of the strips of rose that I made, and I'm just going to press them open like I did on the rest of the seams. So just do this to the rest of the rows that you have sewn together, and then we'll piece those rows together. Okay, so as you can see, I have these strips together, and now I need to put the strips together to create the quilt top. I'm going to add panels of fabric after I have these together. So I need to sew this section together and the middle section. But if this was all square, you just put these together, and you can stick a pin in the side that is the correct one to sew. So I have my main panels together, and I've sewed on a strip right here to fill in this space. And then I'm going to connect these pieces and add in my last strips to make this a square edge. So if you have a design that has interesting extra white space, this is how you would put it in, is you would work in strips and add it sort of like a puzzle piece as you go. As you sew these strips together, you want to make sure that you match up your seams. And so you'll go through and pin or clip the seams, not in here because there's nothing to match, but here and here. And so these are where you're going to put your pins and your clips, and then in between these seams are kind of flex points, just to make sure if this is a little bit less, then you can stretch it out a little bit. Make sure all of these seams match up, so then when you take it out and you iron it, the points come together. Now that your quilt top is complete, you can add a quilt tag, which is optional, but it's really fun and gives a lot of personalization to the quilt beyond your own design. So just in the lower section of the quilt, typically you'll see a quilt tag, which is a message to the recipient or a note saying who made the quilt and what year it was made. It's really up to you what you want, and you can embroider it or write it with a permanent pen. And it just adds a really nice touch to the quilt. And after you've added that, the quilt top is completely finished and ready for the next step, which is basting. And that's where we're going to put the fluff and the backing to make it have some substance and weight to it. So just look out for the next video. That will be how to quilt part 4 on basting. Until then, I wish you all the best. Bye.